So we have a new airliner on Microsoft Flight Sim for PC and Xbox, the A321Neo by LatinVFR. But is it worth it? If you've seen it on the marketplace, you'll notice it comes in at a price of £20 UK, 99 pence. Which is roughly $25 US. Is it worth it? Well, first off, it came as a bit of a surprise. I saw it on the marketplace after someone on Instagram tipped me off about it, and I thought, yes, I'll take a look at it. LatinVFR normally make airports. They've never really made a plane for Microsoft Flight Sim before, to my knowledge, so it was certainly interesting to take a look at it. Now, I've been flying around in the A321Neo all this morning. I went from a short flight from Seattle to Portland and then just did a few circuits at Dublin. So I've got a good feeling of this aircraft and plenty of stages of flight. In today's video I'll be talking about every aspect, from the cockpit to systems to flight model to interior to external model, giving you my final thoughts at the end. So be sure you stay to the end for that. Without further delay, let's get right into it. Okay, so to kick off, let's talk about what you actually get for the £21 UK or almost £21 UK. You get four variants. You get the Leap long range, the Pratt & Whitney, and the Pratt & Whitney long range. So two different engine types, and then with those two different engine types, you get in the long range version and the normal A321Neo. You get many liveries with it. I haven't counted them all. There's so many. I'm showing you some on the screen now. And of course, the liveries correspond with the aircraft type. So that's a plus. To start off, there's a few variants, 4 to be exact, and plenty of liveries to go around, so at least we're getting a bit of value there. Now let's talk about this aircraft. Well, heading outside, you can see it looks decent, it looks fairly nice, but before we talk about the external model, let's head inside the cockpit. Now, as you can see, taking off from Seattle, the cockpit looks a lot like an A320 with some slight modifications. That is basically because the A321Neo is basically the A320Neo. It's just longer and a bit heavier, so what you're seeing is realistic. Don't expect a vastly different cockpit, because in real life, that's not how it works. Now, there are some slight modifications, especially looking at the structure of the cockpit, and in the fact it's a bit bigger, I'd imagine, to the sides, at least it feels it. That might just be the default cockpit. I'm of course used to the fly-by-wire cockpit. But you can see some slight modifications. I don't believe there's any more switches or buttons. I think there's just some texture rework. All in all, there is some minor modifications here, but it's very similar to the A320Neo cockpit, so you'll feel somewhat familiar. I did say earlier that texture work has gone on, but to be perfectly honest with you, I don't use the default A320 all too often, so my memory might be tricking me here, but I can certainly see some texture work when you look towards the primary flight displays, and in the middle, it looks a bit different to the A320 and Neo default version, but as I said, I might be wrong here, but I do believe there is some modifications here. So let's talk about what lies beneath those screens and the buttons. The systems, well, it's a longer and heavier aircraft than the A320, but aside from that, systems are almost identical, so using default systems, which is what they've used here, is acceptable. Now for me, on PC, I'd prefer some custom systems, you know, fly-by-wire level systems, as opposed to just using default systems. But to be honest, because the A321Neo is basically an extended A320, you know, they're not actually doing anything wrong here by using default systems. It's just something to bear in mind. All in all, at the moment, all it seems like is a repaint of the A320, the default A320, which, to be perfectly honest, isn't too far from reality in real life. But there are some things that change it. For example, sounds. Now, of course, the aircraft being a bit different in terms of shape to the A320, or significantly different I should say, does result in different sounds, and of course they do have different engines. Whether that be between the A320 and the A321, or the different variants of the engines on this aircraft. And I have to say, LatinVFR have been really good with sounds here. They do sound really nice. The custom sound set for the engines, the only thing that lets it down slightly, and I guess this comes from using default cockpit systems, is that there's not really any sort of fly-by-wire level cockpit sounds. So while you do have good engine sounds, you don't have good cockpit sounds, and that can break the immersion quite a bit. I noticed when I was turning the parking brake on and off, I wasn't getting the noise that I get in the fly-by-wire A320, which is to be expected because it's using default systems. But I feel as if LatinVFR wanted to go a bit of a step beyond the default cockpit, they could have added some sounds there. All in all, systems are default Microsoft Flight Sim systems, nothing that stands out. Sound set, on the other hand, is good for the engine, but not good for the cockpit, so I guess it's a bit of a plus point there, but it is what it is. Now let's talk about the flight model. Now, although it's similar to the A320 in many ways, the flight model is something that sets it apart. It feels slightly heavier than the A320, which is what it would be because it's a bigger aircraft. But equally, it feels a bit more on rails when I compare it to the fly-by-wire A320Neo. Now this might explain why my first landing into Portland was very good, I have to say. I was quite impressed with my first landing, but I did feel as I was coming down I wasn't battling with the aircraft too much, although I was in a 2-knot crosswind, which of course actually doesn't do much. It was a pretty relatively calm landing, but I didn't actually feel like I was battling with the aircraft like I do with the A320Neo. It just sort of felt like it was on rails. I didn't have to correct myself too much, I sort of just pushed down and the aircraft did all its work. Which Airbus aircraft do have the tendency to feel, but I don't know, it just felt a bit different. Maybe that's what the A321Neo feels like in real life. So they've clearly spent some time on the flight model. I'm glad they haven't just ported it over from the default A320, because that would just be completely sloppy, lazy and unrealistic, so here's a plus point here. Now what sets this aircraft apart as well is the fact that we've got an interior. Of course we don't have an interior with the default A320Neo or the fly-by-wire A320Neo, so it's nice to see one here. But I gotta be honest, I do feel like they might as well not bothered, because you walk into the back of the aircraft and it just looks horrifically ugly. Now here am I using window view watching my landing into Portland, and you can see the sort of window frame is popped out. It just doesn't look good, you know? If you're gonna do a cabin, at least do it right. It's probably one of the least demanding things in the whole aircraft. You're not messing around with any systems, you're just building a decent model, and they don't seem to have done a good job at it. So I'd say this is nothing to shout about. Don't bother going into the cabin. If you want to get some good wing views, then you're going to be a bit disappointed, because whenever you do, you just get that horrible window frame popping out. Now finally, as we've talked about everything inside the aircraft, let's talk about outside. It's acceptable. Now we're going to take a look at the LEAP long range, the Aer Lingus one, here at Dublin. I think it looks pretty nice, livery's good, but when you get closer to the aircraft you can see it's quite poor in some areas. Looking towards the wheels, they sort of float off the ground just slightly. Now in flight here you can see the beautiful Alaska Air A321. It does look pretty good. We're not getting too much wing flex, although it does somewhat exist. It might just be wing vibration, but it's not extreme wing flex. You can see it looks nice. I do think the Alaska Air livery does bring it out a bit better. But yeah, it's an acceptable external model. It's not groundbreaking, you know, it's not Phoenix A320 level. So let's wrap it up here. We've taken a good look at this aircraft, I feel. I've got to be honest, I'm a bit stuck. In places it's nice, but it's not outstanding. I'd say this is really an Xbox product. It suits Xbox far better than it suits PC. If you're on Xbox and you want a somewhat different airliner, then this might be for you. You know, it's pretty good value for money, I'd say, with all the liveries and all the engine variants. Different sound set, different flight model. But if you're on PC, this is not for you. You know, you're sort of downgrading away from fly-by-wire level system depth or Phoenix level system depth to default Microsoft Flight Sim level system depth, which isn't that great. So I'd say this is far suited for Xbox, and I imagine that's what LatinVFR have been going for. So hello you Xbox pilots, I know you always want to see more Xbox content, so take this video as one of them. I'd say this aircraft is good for Xbox pilots, but not good for PC pilots. And of course the value does differentiate there. Good value for money on Xbox, bad value for money on PC. Realistically, it shouldn't be that way, you know, it should be, I guess, a level playing field for Xbox and PC, but that's just how modding is normally on consoles. Until there's a way to bring over good freeware to Xbox, I'm afraid this is your best bet. Sad that it's like that, but hey, it's 21 UK pounds, you'll make up your own mind. I do recommend it on Xbox, I don't recommend it on PC. I understand that's a slightly nuanced point of view. From me today, I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, be sure to tell me down below. Your support is always very much appreciated. I've been keeping up with daily videos quite well recently, but over the next week I will slow down a bit. I'm going away for a week, so I'll see you guys soon. But for me today, that is all. Be sure to like, comment and subscribe, and check out my Amazon affiliate links for all the stuff I used to fly, film and edit down below. But for me today, I'll see you around. Goodbye.